Do you think there's value to doing things each day that suck a little bit?
100%. If you want to get stronger, you've got to do things that require strength. If you want to be tougher, you got to do things that require you to be tougher. Just like you would develop your legs by doing squats and you would develop your back by doing pull-ups, I think you would develop your resiliency by doing repetitions of things that require you to be tougher.
Are there certain forms of exercise, like weightlifting versus cardio, that you find give you an especially big boost in what we're calling energy? And here, this could be cognitive energy, it could be physical energy.
Is there any form of exercise that gives me that energy boost? I would have to say like the high intensity sort of.
Jocko Willink, welcome.
Thanks for having me, man.
You get the training, and do you track your training in a detailed way? Are you keeping track of lifts? And
So I write down what I do. I write down what I do every day. And that way I can go back and say, what was I doing back then? Because I might go through some phase where I'm trying to do more pull-ups or I'm trying to deadlift more and I'm trying, whatever the thing is, I'll go back into, because I get bored of deadlifting after a while. And let's face it, if you just want to be a good deadlifter, you're not going to be that fast, right? You're going to be slow on long runs. So you don't want to go too deep into deadlifting. And you also don't want to be so good at long runs that you can't deadlift a good amount of weight. So I kind of go through phases and I'll get into something for a while and I'll get into something else. So I do log down what I'm doing so I can look back and say, oh dang, I'm not even close to as strong as I used to be, need to get back to that.
I will ask this, are there certain forms of exercise, like weightlifting versus cardio, that you find give you an especially big boost in what we're calling energy? And here, this could be cognitive energy, it could be physical energy, but a readiness for the next thing.
Yeah, first I got to back you up on this. Your science. So do you ever ruck march, like put on a heavy weight and ruck?
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, Peter Attia got me into this. He got me into doing a long Sunday, instead of a long Sunday run, throwing on a lightweight vest or a ruck, going out for like 3 hours. And the first 20 minutes, I find I always want to go faster and get it over with. But then I've learned that the real pain in it sets in around an hour. And then the beauty sets in around 90 minutes where you're like, I could do this all day, all night, and I never want to stop.
See, that's when you were describing how these chemicals get released. And once you're in that automatic mode, in the SEAL teams, you're doing maritime operations for a month, and then you're going to do some kill house shooting. And so you're not carrying a bunch of weight. And then you go out to the desert and now you're putting on 80 pounds and you're going on like day one, you get out there, you're going on an 80-pound ruck march. And the first freaking 17 minutes, the first 23 minutes just suck. They just suck. And what was beautiful was by the time I was, 23, 24 years old, I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna suck for 17 minutes. And then I'm gonna be a robot and it doesn't matter anymore. And I can just keep going forever. So it sounds like what you're saying is what I experienced basically my whole adult life. There's gonna be a little break-in period mentally where you think this totally sucks. And then you just can keep going for a really, really long time. And it's not that big of a deal. To your question of, is there any form of exercise that gives me that energy boost? I would have to say like the high intensity sort of anaerobic blast, whether it's on the bike or on the rower or, swinging a kettlebell hard, something like that, that last 10, 15 minutes, that's a really good way to, peak my mentality for the day.
I think one reason why people are drawn to people who have been in the SEAL teams, you in particular, I think everybody, not just males, females too, I think everybody wants to know their calibration point on their level of toughness. I think people wonder, I think when people talk about buds and all that, I think a lot of people wonder, would I make it through? And if I don't, how tough am I or not tough am I? Is there a way that we can, certainly that we can train it by doing hard things? Like how resilient am I? Should we put ourselves into situations of discomfort just to test that? Because I will say, I think a lot of people look to SEAL teams and team guys in particular calibration point of like, okay, they know how to do hard things. They were selected for the ability to carry logs and get into cold water over and over and roll in the sand and go without sleep for a week or so. But that's probably not what they were doing when they were on deployments. It's clearly a pressure test for something else.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, the basic underwater demolition SEAL training. And quite frankly, going and getting wet and cold and being miserable is actually nothing compared to being on deployment. And a good example that I use to compare this to is when I was on deployment in 2006 in Ramadi, there was, as you were driving off base to go to the city, to go into the city and conduct operations. As you drove out of the compound, on your right was this area that was called the vehicle graveyard. And the vehicle graveyard was exactly what it sounds like. It was probably 75 or 100 vehicles that were blown up, destroyed, burned, in various twisted conditions that had been dragged back through the city and put into this vehicle graveyard. And as you drove by that vehicle graveyard, you know without question that every one of those twisted vehicles represented 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 American casualties. Wounded, horribly wounded, killed. And there you are in a vehicle about to roll out into that city where what you're looking at can easily be you in the next 3 minutes. And you're gonna do that today, you're gonna do that tomorrow, you can do that the next day and the day after that and the day after that. That compared to, and by the way, this isn't just SEALs that are doing that. This is Marines, this is the Army guys that are over there. This is what everyone is doing and they do it. I talk about Marc Lee, who's one of my guys, first SEAL killed in Iraq, and he was the lead turret gunner in the lead Humvee. And like in Vietnam, if you were the point man in Vietnam, if you were on an infantry patrol, you were the point man in Vietnam, you were at risk. Booby traps, ambush. So they rotated you out. Like you didn't have to stay up there all the time. You do an hour up as point man, they get someone else up there. And that guy, the lead turret gunner in a Humvee column of 4, 5, or 6 vehicles, if you hit an IED, that's the vehicle that's gonna hit it, right? If you go into an ambush, that's the guy that's gonna get hit. It's the guy that's standing up in a 50 caliber turret. That's the guy that's gonna die. And Marc was, he was a new guy. So he's in that lead turret, 50 cal, and he never asked to get rotated out. And I remember he's a very extremely charismatic, funny, gregarious comedian. And I remember one night, he's getting ready to roll out, and if I wasn't going out with the platoons, I would go out, see the guys off, give them a hand salute as they're leaving, and I'm like, "How you feeling tomorrow? How you doing, Marc? You good to go?" And he's like, "Feeling lucky, sir." That was his attitude. And he's a guy that's gonna drive by that vehicle graveyard, drive right out in that city, and he's gonna do it the next day and the day after that and the day after that. So, and like I said, that's what the Army guys are doing. That's what the Marine Corps guys are doing. They're doing it. And so as much as the mythology around basic SEAL training goes, to me, that's experience in combat, and what guys do is infinitely harder and infinitely more important. Now, all that being said, basic SEAL training is a very strange laboratory for human beings. It's kind of crazy the way it works. It's obviously extremely difficult, but there's no, I wouldn't put money. You could put odds on somebody making it through, hey, that guy seems like he's gonna be good to go, but I wouldn't put a bunch of money on it, right? And I wouldn't take 100%. I would never take 100% bet on anybody, because there's no one that's 100% gonna make it through that training. And there's just random, some people say it's because of your why. There's people that make it through SEAL training because their ex-girlfriend said they couldn't make it. There's some other guy that makes it through because they promised God that they would make it. There's some other guy that made it through because, their dad said they could have. There's every one of these examples you can come up with. And it's good enough for some random dude to make it through. And it doesn't matter what your pedigree is, doesn't matter where you're from. There's guys from Iowa, there's guys from Florida, there's guys from wherever that make it. And there's guys from Iowa, and there's guys from Florida, and there's guys from wherever that don't make it. Guys from farms, guys from silver spoon in their mouth, and you just can't predict it. And I mean, it has to have something to do with the fact that how bad you actually want to do it. It's a strange thing. If I was in the world, if I didn't do that training, I wouldn't be trying to figure out if I could make it or not, because you don't know. It's a very strange thing. And it's so mythical almost right now, right? It's mythical that how hard it is. And this is not too many people make it through, man. It's
15%. Yeah. From all the folks that I've talked to who are there or gone through, instructors seem that 15% number is unlikely to change as long as they keep the process the same. It just seems like about 15% of people seem to have something in them that can perhaps grow during that training, but that it is being identified and selected for rather than somehow being built up across at least that phase, the early phases of training. And then at some point they build on that capacity. And this gets to this really somewhat controversial issue, frankly, are people wired differently? Listen, I started off in neural development, and I'll tell you that there are some universal properties of neural development in all surviving humans, like that you're gonna breathe without having to think about it. Your heart's gonna beat without having to think about it. But beyond that, there's a lot of variation in natural levels of dopamine and serotonin. There's nature plays a powerful role, and nurture. And what's interesting though is we can't always predict from parents what nature is going to do. Recently, we had someone on the podcast, a guy who talks about inheritable acquired traits. You don't expect that because you work out that your grandkids will be more muscular and have better endurance. But there's actually some evidence that that may be the case. And you go, well, how could that be? We got two kinds of cells in your body. It turns out you have what are called somatic cells, which are all of them. Then you have the germ cells, which are your sperm and your wife's eggs. Well, why wouldn't the DNA of the sperm cells and the egg cells be modifiable by experience if all the other cells are? And it turns out there's some evidence that maybe it's not the DNA, but that the RNA are. Think about that. That means that and we've known this, that people that have been in a famine several generations later, there are implications for blood sugar regulation in their great grandkids. So the idea that experience and acquired traits can change us has some validity. Yeah. And and this gets into really complicated things because people go, oh, this is like the giraffe that had to like crane its neck and then gave birth to longer neck giraffes. And it's like, well, not exactly, but also not entirely untrue either. So yeah. I love the idea that there are inherited traits and that that nature and nurture play a role, but that hard work may actually transmit across generations.
Yeah, in SEAL training, you have kids that come through that they call legacies, which means that they have a dad, I think a dad, brother, whatever, and they do have a better chance of making it, but it's not a guaranteed chance at all. And, my personal opinion is like, I think a legacy kid would have a better chance of making it just due to the Thanksgiving dinner that you're going to have to go through for the rest of your life with your family.
If you don't.
Yeah, if you're even invited, which you might be on your own. But yeah, there's something to that as well. But I think that's just more the pressure that someone must feel like, hey, there's no way I'm going to be allowed back in my home if I don't make it through this training. So I'm going to have to just go ahead and suck it up. But not everyone makes it. And it's a bummer when that does occur.
Well, for people who are not thinking about going through SEAL training or who missed the opportunity or who are not interested in that for whatever reason, do you think there's value to doing things each day that suck a little bit, or from time to time doing something that, puts one into a state of deliberate discomfort?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Even in order to improve yourself, you got to impose some discipline on yourself, right? If you want to get stronger, you've got to do things that require strength. If you want to be tougher, you got to do things that require you to be tougher. I think that's pretty straightforward.
Does that mean doing things that are not pleasurable? And I try and do something that's uncomfortable to me about once a week, something I really don't like. It doesn't matter what that is, but I try and do something that's kind of like unpleasant. Mm-hmm. So should people seek truly like bad experiences, provided that they're done in a safe way?
Yeah. I think that you're gonna, just like you would develop your legs by doing squats, and you would develop your back by doing pull-ups, I think you would develop your resiliency by doing repetitions of things that require you to be tougher.